Hi, welcome back. So last night I finished Alamut by Vladimir Bartol, staying up quite late to finish it, and even later thinking about it, because this is one of those books that even before I finished reading it, I knew was going to fall into my 15 to 20 books of this Read Around the World project that's now been going on about 2 years, that really reframed and changed my perspective on the world. And I'll try to elucidate why it had that impact on me, starting with the terrifying lead character of Hassan, who is based on a real historical figure. So when we talk about terrifying characters in literature, I can go right to Cormac McCarthy's The Judge, or Alicia, who I think is in fact even more terrifying than The Judge. But that's a conversation for another day. But I will say that it's closer to The Judge in the sense that it's based on a real historic figure, the founder and first leader of the what became the Assassins. And I don't want to talk too much about the whole political backstory to this. There's an allegory here potentially about Slovenia under Mussolini's rule in Italy, because the author was kind of could not write openly about that. There's some backstory to that. And then there are also other political perspectives that range from very interesting to the most ridiculous way you could possibly interpret this as being about a specific religion and how that ideology leads to certain outcomes. So I really want to focus on more of the, I guess, the human universals in this, regarding leadership, regarding the sort of cynicism that is behind manipulative ideologies, and just how I and we, experience this in day-to-day life, and why this character is so terrifying, so universal, and just so real, beyond being a real historical figure, this character of Hassan. And so this isn't about a specific religion, absolutely not. And there's nothing that can point to that more, I think, than the fact that a few years after the events in this book, Pope Urban would make a call to the masses that would launch centuries of crusades and further violence. And so this isn't about one religion or the other. We can find this sort of the terrifying reality between the ideals and ideologies that move people in all parts of the world throughout time, no matter how mundane, to the greatest of leaders, especially in this digital age where we're all kind of forming petty kingdoms around, different social media figures, and in our jobs, we have our corporate leaders, we have our political leaders. So this idea of leadership, cynicism, the false ideologies that impact these things and shape the world are just so much a reality at every scale. And hopefully I'll get into that a bit more or elucidate that. But when I think about what I'm going to reading for, am I here to understand, to feel, to find a transcendent experience? And I think really, even though I've bounced around on these different things, it's all of the above. And it's a book like this that reminds me that it's not one thing, that conversations about how to read, what you should be reading, it's all just a personal journey, a personal experience. And some might say I'm sort of lacking a sort of aesthetic judgment by saying that, but I think that my own reading journey, without really caring about those things, has been very rewarding. And if nothing else, this book being among those 15 to 20 books. Those 15 to 20 books in the last 2 years, out of the 150 or so I've read so far, more to come, are worth the entire experience to me personally and to how I feel. And really, I don't know what else there is to look for beyond that. And this is all related to I think the question behind this book. I'm not quite sure how, but Alamut has been an intentionally personal read for me, because behind the eyes of every ideologue is the saying it's a motto throughout the book. It's on the back of the book. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. This book is also, even though it's written in the 1930s, is the inspiration for the Assassin's Creed video games. And if you want an example of a video game completely missing the point, sorry to say, this would be it. I think that there is very little you can actually get from those video games compared to the mind-bending experience that is reading Alamut. So if you're interested in that sort of profound experience, even if you're coming from the place of somewhat knowing about the assassins and this story from the game, I think if you found this video, this is your sign that you should be reading this book, and welcome to the world of literature that can enhance all other types of media, all other things that you're doing in life. And that, again, back to the question of why I'm reading. Reading to me isn't an end in itself. I don't believe that everybody should spend most of their life reading. I don't think that's even possible. I feel that it is simply something that enhances every other part of life. And so maybe that's my own ideology here as I'm talking about ideologues, but behind the eyes of every ideologue, nothing is true, everything is permitted. And I already mentioned, especially true in a digital age where we are constantly being manipulated by external algorithms, whether we think we are or not. We're manipulated by so many things that we don't even realize. We follow advice from people we barely know. We trust people we barely know without realizing we're doing it. And after reading this book, I realized that there is a reason that I trust very few people in life. Very, very few people that are close to me, and there is a reason for that, because not only behind the eyes of every ideologue, behind the eyes of every leader in your life, and this is one of the things that happens when if you start to become disenchanted with a religion you grew up with. I speak from experience. You will start to no longer see people as holy emanations that are mostly good. You start to see them as having sort of their own mix of thoughts and hidden worlds and secrets behind those eyes. And so behind the motivations of the explained reasons for why we should be doing what we're doing, whether it be at work, a boss who's trying to motivate you, or a religious leader who is convincing you that this is what God told them, this is what God wants, this is where you should seek the word, or behind a political leader promising revolution in the name of freedom and equality. Did Pope Urban II, a few years after the events in this book, look out at the masses as people who must be deceived, while secretly in his private chambers he sought the actual truth of life in this sort of empty void where nothing is true and everything is permitted? And then there's something within myself, but let's first talk about the young man and his friends, who are kind of, I suppose, the protagonist of the book. And I mean, Hassan is the terrifying figure that is manipulating these people to his ends, and his ends are almost as mysterious to himself as they are to us. But we have this Ibn Tahir and his friends that he makes at the castle of Alamut, where this has all been taken over by Hassan, and he's creating sort of this new ideology. And we get this slow manipulation of their minds that at first seems a little bit like something you've read before. But I don't know what it is about this book that just really got under my skin. And it's counterbalanced by Halima, and she is with another group of slave girls and women who are brought to this castle to play a part as the role of the virgins of paradise, which these men are promised. And then that, along with hashish, is what manipulates them into kind of further and further being indoctrinated into this world that Hassan is trying to create. This ideology he's creating out of nothingness, out of a simple will to power. And we get harrowing scenes of sudden death of main characters as a result. There were a few moments in the book that were just shocking to me, how sudden some of these characters are simply wiped out, simply by the will of Hassan, orchestrated by him, and unintentional as a result of Hassan's actions. It's really something. And at the same time that I'm reading all of this, I have been working my way through the Shahnameh. There are references to the Persian Book of Kings by Ferdowsi, which I'm going to say I actually have not read this entire thing. I read up to the death of Rostam, which is he's kind of the most well-known figure, the Arthur, the Lancelot, if you will. You know, he's the main figure of the Persian Book of Kings. I really hate having to draw on the Western stuff so let's just say he is the main character, because neither of those is a really good comparison for all the things he is. His character is incredibly morally gray. There's a famous scene where he unintentionally kills his own son, for example, which connects also directly to something that happens in Alamut with Hassan. And there's an incredible amount of depth that reading the Shahnameh at the same time as Alamut will bring to that whole experience. I listened to an amazing audiobook online as well, which I'm going to recommend. If you look at this giant tome and just cannot get all the way through it like I did, it was very useful for me to use this audio performance, which there's really only one out there. But it's incredibly dramatized. It's got different actors who do different voices, I think, or somebody just doing a really great number of impressions, I'm not sure, but it's got music, it's orchestrated, it's got sound effects, and it was just a treat to listen to, and really just immersed me in the world of the Persian Book of Kings and helped me to understand far more about it than just giving up on trying to read this big tome right now. I do want to come back to this and read more of it, especially the parts after Rostam, to understand more. But I think even listening to that audiobook that goes from the very beginning, the first kings, all the way to the death of Rostam, will really deepen your appreciation for world literature in a way that few other works can. Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, this is the Penguin edition, obviously, which is unabridged, I believe, translated by Dick Davis, who also, I believe, did Conference of the Birds, which I absolutely love, a Sufi work. So Persian literature is definitely some of the most compelling, has been some of the most compelling for me to explore in this Read Around the World project. And following that up with another direct connection to Alamut is the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, if you're not familiar with it, has this Fitzgerald translation, which is quite common, but it does seem he takes a lot of liberties with the translation. So I went online and found these. Somebody had just created a website where they made a literal translation, a meaning translation, and then tried to match these translations up from the original Farsi to what Fitzgerald was drawing from, and some of them do not match up exactly. So Fitzgerald really did take a lot of creative liberties, it seems, with these passages, if this online source is to be trusted. But I printed all of them out and actually pasted them inside this book, which is beautifully illustrated. A lot of these Rubaiyat editions are beautifully illustrated. So anyway, Omar Khayyam, amazingly enough, was a friend of this historical figure from Alamut, this Hassan, this terrifying historical figure who manipulates these people into serving him completely faithfully behind an ideology, when he, behind it all, is a truly, truly cynical and, if your mind is able to be convinced over to him enough, a wise human being. But I think if you settle on the fact that he has some kind of ultimate truth about life, or that he's wise, that would be what we call a red flag. Something that you should examine further. Not that you're a bad person for at times almost being convinced over to this terrifying character, because that's what makes him so terrifying. Not that you should feel bad for that, but do not stop there. And I would say definitely do not allow Hassan's viewpoint of life, the one behind his manipulative, seeing people as masses to be manipulated, do not, that is not a place to stop, right? But anyway, I found it even in this introduction to the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. It mentions that, so even in the introduction here, it talks about how the author Omar Khayyam was actually a friend of Hassan, and that as the years passed and both his old school friends found him out, came and claimed a share to his good fortune, the vizier was generous and kept his word. Hassan demanded a place in the government, which the Sultan granted at the vizier's request. So on, after many mishaps and wanderings, Hassan became the head of the Persian sect of Ismailans after he was exiled. A party of fanatics who had long murmured in obscurity but rose to an evil eminence under the guidance of his strong and evil will. In AD 1090 he seized the castle of Alamut in the province of Rudbar, which lies in the mountainous tract south of the Caspian Sea, and it was from this mountain home he obtained that evil celebrity among the Crusaders as the Old Man of the Mountains, and spread terror through the world. And it is yet disputed whether the word assassin, which they have left in the language of modern Europe as their dark memorial, is derived from the hashish, or opiate of hemp leaves, which they had maddened themselves to a sudden pitch of oriental desperation, or from the name of the founder of the dynasty. But that's where the word allegedly comes from. And so in this this connection that I happened to be reading the Persian Book of Kings, I read Alamut, and then had happened to pick this Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam up another day, and it was sitting on my shelf, and I had already pasted all the literal translations in there. It was all ready for me to dive in and appreciate Alamut even further. So that is another recommended reading if you're going to get into Alamut. But back kind of to this final thing, that there's something within myself that resonated with this book. It makes me ask myself, and I don't know if this is connected to this idea of exploring your shadow self or recognizing the potential for evil within yourself, but asking myself about my own motivations, for example, for, I don't know, creating a YouTube channel and talking about books and hoping that people find it and like it and subscribe to my channel and so on. And I've come to realize, of course, after doing this, that it's like you don't necessarily want to, and you don't necessarily want this thing that started as a passion project to turn into something that you're obligated to be a leader in, be that figurehead. You don't necessarily want that attention and responsibility that maybe you originally thought would be a great thing. And I can think of sometimes the resentment I've had in the past of other people who were more successful than me. But again, you don't know those people. You don't know if they're happy, and you don't know if they really are better off for their success in something that you might think you want to do. But at the same time, there is that motivation in me that wants to, you know, influence or to, I guess. But I think if I'm looking at what is really fulfilling about this whole thing, it's, I want to be here as a friend that you don't have to talk about books with. And I can do that by talking about a whole range of books through this Reading Around the World project. And I think it's kind of random, the people that are coming to this channel. I don't really know, but that's sort of part of this disjointed, like, you know, you don't really know who I am, and I don't really know who you are in this digital space. And sort of that, but if there's one thing Alamut shows us, is that we really do have reasons to be distrustful of any ideology that's put in our face, any, whether that be a religion, your reasons for staying in a certain career, or whatever it is, that it's good to question things, and that appreciating some level of freedom and humanism is probably the best thing we can do, and that in the end we really are individuals. So we can always talk about this idea of individualism versus collectivism, but yeah, it's really terrifying if you start to think about the implications of any kind of collectivism while reading Alamut. So I don't know. I'm not a scholar on these things. I don't have a massive vocabulary of concepts and philosophies to throw at you, and a rational line. I just read this book and kind of nod and say, it's good to be distrustful, and it's good to question the motives that others have for saying and convincing you of a certain thing, or leading you in a certain direction. It's always good to do. In the end, you can only trust yourself and your close, you know, your close loved ones, the ones you really know, and motivations behind. You never know when somebody behind what they're telling you is the right thing, and what they're doing is really thinking nothing is true and everything is permitted. That's the current lesson of Alamut, but it's for sure a reread book for me. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Mike Reads the World.